Yes, we are live. Good evening, everybody. Hope you have had a good day so far. I hope you've had a good week since we last saw each other. I've had a great week and I've been really looking forward to today because I get to chat with a dear friend who's an accomplished artist. He's a jack of all trades. He does it all. He's a entrepreneur. He's a DJ. He's a electronic artist. He's the mastermind behind successful businesses, which we're going to talk more about. But it's all here in the intro. So if you guys are ready, let's just get straight to it. Here we go. Today on the Short and Sweet Session.
The Short and Sweet Session.
Sharooz Raoofi is a multi-talented electronic artist and entrepreneur living every producer's dream with his impressive collection of vintage synths and a self-made empire as a sound designer and founder of audio companies like Sample Magic and Audiare. With remixes for artists like Moby and Robyn, Sharooz, who also releases music as Principleasure, is always staying ahead of the curve by being innovative and thinking outside the box. Coming up. Guys, please help me welcome and give a standing applause, standing ovation, and confetti, and all the love to the one and only Mr. Sharooz Raoofi. You're
Hello.
live! Yes!
Thanks for having me. Appreciate being here on this gloomy Thursday, isn't it? Gloomy Thursday night in London.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
No.
Thanks for bringing me on board. Your professionalism with setting this all up astounds me.
Oh, thank you so much. First of all, thank you for taking the time to sit here and chat with me and spread your wisdom and knowledge with the rest of us, because I've been dying to speak with you. I first have to give a shout out to our dear friends, Ray and Danny, who first introduced us. I heard about you years ago. Ray and Danny, if you're watching, much love to you guys, because Ray and Danny are our mutual friends in Copenhagen who are also artists and working in the business. They were like, you need to meet Sharooz. He's the guy, he's the man, he does it all. And so fast forward, you and I met each other in Berlin, but we skipped the whole introduction because we went straight to the Deutsche Beer and to the white wines and to the party. So actually I want to take the opportunity to kind of like meet you for the first time and dig deep into your brilliant mind, because you have been responsible for so many great things. So I first of all wanted to in the intro I gave a brief introduction of some of the things that you've been up to, but I'm super curious to rewind and bring me up to speed with what was the first spark of inspiration that brought you to music?
Yeah, I mean it's a good question. It's not something I get asked that often, but I used to hate music actually, because I grew up in Northern Ireland, in a city called Belfast, and it's that typical classic sort of education in the 80s. Like I was forced to play violin and absolutely hated it. Did it for years. Was a bit sort of, I was small and got bullied and was like a bit of a dork. And then I started playing guitar, and when I was about 12 or 13, then I started playing. And things kind of changed. I was like, wow, I experienced music in a way that wasn't constricted to playing classical music from eras past. That just wasn't. It's not interesting to a teenager. And this world opened very quickly. I started playing in I guess you could call them punk bands, new wave bands, and I started playing all over the country. The country being Northern Ireland. We set up a UK tour. We almost got signed with Sony Music. They were following us. They had scouts coming to the shows for years. And this was like in the kind of late 90s, I would say, 96, 97. And I somehow ended up taking a trip to Ibiza and started hearing electronic. And I know it sounds like a kind of a screwball, a classic sort of...
I'm laughing because it's like when you know.
Well, absolutely, absolutely, and it's almost a cliche at this point.
Yeah.
But I went to, I think it was Space. It was one of those clubs,
Yeah.
and it was out of Space or Amnesia, and just got involved. Started. I think Frankie Knuckles was playing. It was like a death mix party or something.
Oh my
and this
God. Yeah.
was, at their peak in the '90s, and even though that particular style of music doesn't inspire me to create. I don't create that kind of music now. Back then, this was pure house music. It was fantastic. It was. I wish I could express more of my love for it than what I do now. But that was the beginning of it. Really, I got into that, and at that time I had an Atari computer, which had all the connections for making music, connecting synthesizers and stuff. So I came back from Ibiza, and almost overnight ditched the guitar and started, the unreliability of the other people in the band when you're that age, like trying to get my guys to come out on tour.
Yeah.
And while everyone was still at school, it wasn't working out. So I got this Atari, started making beats, and that was in earnest the really start my introduction to electronic music, and I never really strayed too far away from that. 20 years later.
So it sounds like you. I mean, obviously which I didn't know about you, but you had a formal musical training. You had a classical upbringing. So you come from from a schooled mind of music.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the classic stuff, the music theory stuff. It's one of those things that at the time you hated. It's like maths, and now it's. On all these years later, it's becoming so it's so handy for it's some of the stuff I do. Obviously, I build synthesizers and stuff like that. Without having that knowledge and knowing how keys relate to each other and time signatures and all that kind of stuff, the very cornerstone of producing your own music as an electronic artist and creating these devices is to know the theory behind them extensively well. While I don't rely solely on my own ability, I mean, I've got great people who help me build these things, put these things together. It is incredibly useful to know what others are sort of talking about in that domain, and being able to port my experience as an electronic music performer into an instrument, and without a theoretical background, it's very hard to do that.
Absolutely. So it sounds like I also mentioned to the people out there that you have an impressive collection of vintage or analog gear, which have been well documented. If you look online, you have a setup that most producers would totally envy. And I heard you say somewhere that this was like you already started collecting these things from an early age. And did you already know at that time that this would come in handy to this was something that you would build on later on in life?
Yeah, well, I kind of did actually. When the funny thing is, a lot of the stuff I've got now, which is, regarded amongst like serious electronic musicians as like the synthesizer or the drum machine, that one thing that gives the sound, like the 808, and the 101, all these things. I actually had them all back in the day when no one wanted them. People wanted digital gear. They wanted like rack-mounted sound modules and Planet Fats and things like that. And while I was collecting all this stuff, I never really, because there was never really any value in it when I was accruing it. I never was in had the opportunity to sell any of it when I didn't have any money when I was a student. I just kept it. I mean, I sold a bunch of stuff which I should never have sold for peanuts, which is worth thousands of pounds now. But I basically never, gave up collecting this stuff, and it went everywhere with me. I was in north of England at college, and they came to London with me, and then some of it came to Berlin when I was living out there, and eventually it all wound up in Los Angeles. And I've had this studio there for about 3 years now, where it's all kept, and we do some cool sessions and get people in. And generally speaking, it's not really it actually has got a website and you can actually hire it, but we don't tend to take sort of bookings just off the street, if you like. It tends to be sort of a word of mouth thing. We've had guys like DJ Tennis and Ten Snake and Ryan Hemsworth and Eagles and Butterflies and guys like that come in, and
people who know what they're doing with it.
Yeah, well, most of them know what they're doing. Some of them don't. Some of them come in, they know what they're doing with it, they just don't use it. They just come in with their laptop, plug in, and don't really end up using a lot of gear. But I think the last person we had in there was Black Madonna. So, we've had probably about 30 or 40 artists, high-profile artists, use it over the last 3 or 4 years. And Roland shot some of their promo videos for the TR8 in there. We've had Rolly in there. I think we've had Behringer, Apple come by. It's a really cool spot. It's like a confluence of creativity, and also a place where people just come and hang out during like when they're in LA. They make a note to come, and I actually live there as well when I'm there. I have this like I think they call it a Murphy bed, which all my friends make fun of me so much for literally for sleeping in there because I'm there.
It's your precious, my precious.
Well, it just makes sense. I mean, it's a huge space. Relatively for Los Angeles, by Los Angeles standards, it's not a huge space, but compared to sort of typical London studios, it's pretty big.
Yeah.
And it's just a big old warehouse, and I sleep in the corner. I have a fold away Murphy bed which comes out the wall, and I just kind of go and sleep there when I'm in town. And when I'm not in town, I fold it up and people use it. So
yeah,
the studio, not the bed.
So I found I have so many things that I want to talk to you about because you are, as I mentioned, also you're a jack of all trades who've done it all, who does it all. Not only are you a brilliant artist, but you're also a successful entrepreneur. But I first want to touch on the artist side of you, and we spoke about sound design. So the first song that I just want to play a little snippet of is when I first heard this track, I was like, I need to put it in. This is so beautiful. And maybe you could talk. The first track is Fractal Gem from your moniker Principleasure. I heard you say in an interview, you gave a funny story or explanation of why you used a different name instead of Sharooz, because for many years you were performing, you made music as your own name, correct?
Yeah, indeed I did. Yeah. It got old. There was another guy who from the Netherlands who was using the same name, and let's just say I wasn't a big fan of his music, and he was kind of playing these sort of like local, sort of like handbag clubs using Sharooz name, and there wasn't really anything I could do about it. And it was a good time actually to just take stock and try something completely new and slower, darker.
Yeah. And it sounds it's because your track record shows that you're constantly renewing yourself. So I guess it was a natural evolution for you to change it up. So here is a short snippet of Fractal Gem by yourself, but under the name Principleasure. Here it is, guys. Rich, fat synths, and oh my God, sounds amazing.
Thank you.
Really, what the intention with this entire series is really to talk to people like yourself who followed their inner voice and their passion, and you found a way to do it. And what I found very valuable is to speak to people how they manifested it, because there is no manual for the business that we're in. Like you can go to school for certain things, but it's really living the life and then finding out, as you go along, trial and error. So especially for the budding producers and sound designers out there, like for you to land remixes for an artist like Moby and an artist for Robyn, like how in the world did that come to be? For example, beginning with the Moby track.
Yeah, so actually the Robyn track happened first. I did that with my friend Miles, who he still does produce under the name Milo.
Yeah.
And his management were also managing Moby. So they heard the remix. Moby at the same time. So no, actually, sorry, I think Moby came first. He was around that time playing this track I had from years back called Get Off, which was under the Sharooz name.
Yeah.
He was at big festivals, like all the big US festivals like EDC, and, thousands of people, like 100,000 people, and Moby would just drop my track, 2 or 3 songs in.
Wow.
management just reached out and sent me a song, didn't tell me who it was by. It was immediately identifiable by the vocals, and I emailed back, said, is this Moby?
Yeah.
And said yes, did the mix, and he ended up putting it on which is unusual for an artist for an electronic music artist, putting it on a bespoke remix album CD, which, to this day, if I ever go to like Japan or anywhere, the CD is still there in Tower Records.
Wow.
Awesome to see that Moby CD with that remix on there. So yeah, I think it was a combination of the two, having the connection with Milo and having done some music with him, and also having had Moby play a couple of my tracks and be familiarized with him. And of course, I went and emailed him afterwards and was like, hey, we should collaborate on stuff. And I think he followed me on Instagram for a minute. We used to send each other messages, and then he kind of just he dropped off, and I never heard from him again, sadly. So,
but you managed to make a sickening remix. So since we're talking about Moby, let's just give the kids out there a little taste of One Time We Lived. Here we go.
And I remember the way you looked. The sun had set, the lights were down. I remember the light in your eyes. Do you remember at all? Do you remember at all? Well, isn't that what we wanted? Isn't that what we wanted? Isn't that what we had? Do we know what we need? Now that it's gone, 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 gone,
Wonderful. That was a remix by Sharooz and Miles of Moby, One Time We Lived. I love that. You took me straight to the clubs. I was on a beach at an after hour in Ibiza.
I'm really glad it's had an effect on it. It's 12 years old, I think. 13 years old. It's quite some time ago. I can't believe it's that long ago. But glad it still sounds fresh to you. I tend to listen to these old things and be like, shit, I should have done this. I should have done that. I should have treated it differently. But
that's just, we've moved on from where we were at that time. And I think that's inevitable as artists, that we always want to, but it's a snapshot of where you were at that time. And it's beautiful. I mean, I think I know exactly what you mean. That's beautiful. Obviously, when you have a vocal, then it's obvious that you have something to. For example, when you're creating a track, when you have a vocal, that it can dictate where to go. But for example, some of your other tracks, as Principleasure, because a lot of people, if you're not familiar with electronic music, you would maybe think that that's easy music compared to other styles. But actually, electronic music, when I first started making electronic music, coming from a soul R&B gospel background, or like a more schooled musician kind of background, it was one of the hardest thing to program or to figure out how to compose the thing, because it's so minimalistic compared to other styles, but yet rich, and it seems like you use less elements to make something so nuanced.
Yeah.
And what is your approach to, or like what is your creative process when you are creating your music?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it is. I'm the same as you. I'm one of those people that finds it much easier to actually build a song in a typical song structure.
Yes.
Song, but I should say a typical song around vocal. With some, melodies and chords and things around it. I mean, normally if I do a remix, it's just the a cappella I would use. Yeah. So with Pleasure, it is actually really hard. I find it much harder to construct something where there isn't an obvious top line. Because of that, you have to work so much harder, I think, on the sonic palette and the peaks and troughs and the parts that really are intended to go off, the parts that are intended to have a strong emotional response. I mean, my music as Principleasure is not typically club music. It sits somewhere between cinematic, album listening, and possibly some club moments in there as well. I mean, I'd like to think that some of it can be performed in the club, but it's really hard to get that balance right. It's if you have an obvious top line, a song's kind of written. You as a producer, you get in and you embellish the voice, the vocal.
Yeah.
But with Principleasure, it's very hard to say how it starts. It normally starts with the drums, and then it really is just, it could be something that's just programmed or automated on like a step sequencer or something.
Yeah.
And manipulating that sound through the course of the track, be it through filtering or bringing specific controls up and down on the synthesizer, is usually that's basically the Principleasure sound. And I find it difficult. It's very hard to catch a vibe sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, and now to bridge over to a segue to another venture that you've successfully created. I didn't even know that until recently, that Sample Magic, which you are the brain, the mastermind of, which you later on sold to Splice. But I've always bought a lot of stuff from Sample Magic because, as I mentioned, it's for the people out there who are not familiar. This is like the Bible, sound Bible, library Bible of producers and audiophiles and audio nerds like ourselves, of a very rich catalog of sounds, which definitely has helped myself personally. But what I want to tap into the story of Sample Magic, because was this a creation of you already nerding with your gear that you had at home, or how did the whole Sample Magic, how did you start it, create such a successful business from scratch?
Well, firstly, thank you. I appreciate that you're a fan of it or have been a fan of it. I mean, it's always great to hear that.
Absolutely.
Even though I'm longer in charge.
Yeah.
But it actually started as an accident, as a lot of good things do. And I was living at the time, I had a studio in Finsbury Park in London. Was finding it really difficult to get by, actually. It was about 2006, 2007, and was just trying everything I could, really, so I wouldn't have to give up my studio and could continue paying the rent. It was a tough time. And something I was doing a lot was using sample beats from at that point it was sample DVDs or sample CDs. I was loading them into the PC or the sampler and just taking all these beats, and that would be the cornerstone for a lot of my productions at the time. And I started to realize how badly they were all put together. So I just started to make beats and sell them on eBay. And within a couple of weeks, I mean, that's literally, I would just take these. It would be parts of songs that I couldn't finish.
Yeah.
I'd rip them into composite parts, composite loops, like 4-bar structures, and just chuck them on DVDs and sell them. And I started selling so many on eBay that I decided to, properly press up these CDs and do them with DVDs, as it were, with proper artwork, a proper color booklet. Like, we really went to town on the physical production.
Wow.
And I think by the Christmas, that was in the summer of that year. By the Christmas, I think we'd sold something like 3,000 or 4,000 DVDs, and these things sell for like $50 each.
Wow.
It's not like $10 for CD.
No.
So we just had this huge behemoth amount of orders.
Yeah.
And then we started having to build a company around it because there was so much administration went with it, with so much pressure to follow up with more releases. And we started booking in like 3 or 4 releases a month. And by the time I'd sold it 2 years ago, in 2018, I think we had something like 550 collections. And we had over 150 producers and sound designers making the collections. And we had, believe, about 6 or 7 full-time staff and about 10 part-time staff. So it was a pretty big enterprise at that point.
That is insane. I mean, I was so I was like, really? Sharooz created Sample Magic? I still download, I still buy a lot of sounds from Sample Magic. So what I'm curious to hear, like, how you mentioned that it was like an accident, but what did you come from a business-minded background, or how did you acquire all this knowledge to run such a successful business while being an artist and running all these things together?
Well, the funny thing is, as Sample Magic was starting to peak, completely on a different tangent, I was starting to get quite a lot of DJ bookings under my Sharooz name. So in some ways, when I look at it, I think I would love to have just backed one horse and given it my full attention. But weirdly, both started to work towards a common trajectory. And it's quite strange how that synergy happened. But none of the success of Sample Magic was in any way contrived. Like it was very alien to us to hear about the concept of a company that was set up with an exit in mind, with an acquisition in mind. It was never anything we'd ever done. I mean, our company structure was so badly organized, it took us years to get it in shape. It wasn't until 6, 7, 8 years later almost that we actually became incorporated and became a proper company and started, accounting to ourselves properly on distributor sales and things like that. So in all honesty, over those 11 years I owned that company, a lot of the knowledge was acquired by making mistakes and doing things wrong and learning the hard way.
Yeah, okay.
Have to be done right. And that's just about the best way you can learn that stuff. I really fully believe you can go to school for it, because there's so many variables in running a company like that. And a lot of it is also being in the right place. And at the point at which we started, everything else that was in the marketplace, in my opinion, was so terrible that it felt like a clean home run to just be doing something that sounded good and was well presented, and good artwork and good presentation.
That's insane. I mean, what I found so interesting is talking during these past. You are the 10th guest. It's a little milestone at the Short and Sweet session. So for the past 10 weeks, I've had the pleasure of interviewing different kinds of artists and entrepreneurs. And artists are not necessarily known for being entrepreneurial, but you have to be that. And in some ways, all the guests have definitely had an entrepreneurial edge. And what I was so looking forward to speaking to you what you've helped me understand or cement is that it is trial and error, especially for the younger generations out there who wanting to embark on this business. I'm sure you can read a lot of stuff, but really it's walking the walk and making the
there's no one rule for two types of individuals. I mean, you got to go out there, you got to try it. It's obviously quite a negative landscape right now.
Yeah.
Whether or not the problems that are happening in the world right now go on to last longer than we all expect them to, I'm not sure. But there's always going to be an opportunity for creativity to stand out. And it's the one fantastic thing that's happening right now is more and more artists are taking matters into their own hands. The typical traditional structures of music organizations, music business organizations, are either having to completely reinvent themselves and be the artist's advocate or falling by the wayside.
Yeah.
Either way, it's a really good time to be independent. It's a really good time to be promoting oneself as a self-fulfilling entity, if that makes sense. And I think that all artists should really pay a lot of attention to how they're going to support themselves doing this. I mean, 30, 40 years ago, you didn't have to give a shit about that. It was as good as getting a record deal and the rest of it was done for you. Nowadays, there's absolutely no guarantee with anything.
Absolutely.
Having someone pay you money to do something, a company or corporation pay you money to do something, is definitely not a long-term fix anymore. It's not going to, even if you get the dream publishing contract or recording contract that you've been after, even if it's with a major label, it certainly won't set you up for more than a few years.
True, absolutely. And how did you, on a deeper inner level, how did you? It sounds like you've always known, like you've had you have an intuition. It sounds like that you knew what to do, but have you? Yes. How did you navigate through all these things?
Well, a lot of the things I started and did in music publishing, with Sample Magic, even to a certain degree with Audiare, have actually kind of been accidental and non-intentional paths. I mean, Sample Magic, 100%. For the most part, I would say more than half of the things that I've become involved with, I think the only thing that's been intentioned with any real purpose, without it sounding too contrived, hopefully, is the Principleasure project.
Yeah.
Everything else has kind of just happened by accident, really. I mean, Sample Magic was a means to supplement my income, and it was easier than it was now as an electronic music artist to derive an income, but it was still definitely tough. And, a lot of the time, these side hustles, if you like, they can end up bubbling to the fore and being the main thing that you end up pursuing.
Yeah.
But I think in my case, a lot of them happened accidentally, and a few of them failed. I had numerous ventures at probably peaking 3 or 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And, there are some things that do incredibly well financially or do incredibly well by means of profile.
Yeah.
I personally prefer it if my projects reach people rather than be something that's set up to be acquired or to make money essentially.
Yeah.
But it's a delicate balance, and I think there have been some things on there that the accidental things have always been the ones that have managed to rise to the top. It's weird.
Wow. How would you describe yourself? Are you more, well, it sounds like you're a perfect balance of artist, a right brain and a left brainer, of artist and entrepreneurial. But is there, how would you describe yourself? Are you more the one or the other, or have you really just found a way to balance the two through your trial and error and experience?
I prefer artists. I mean, I'm not the sort of person that could, take on a company with sort of 50 employees and know what the right thing is to do. I'm not a leader in that sense. And I think an entrepreneur is somebody that feels comfortable in that situation.
Yeah.
That's not really me. I feel much more comfortable in playing music, performing music, making music, and bringing that message to people.
Yeah.
It's just a shame that in my experience, in my time, I haven't been able to fully call on that at all times, because the ultimate life I would like to have is just to, it's just music. And it may well be at some point that all the other things that I've done in the past will just whittle down to, they actually all do whittle down to one thing. I mean, it all starts with music, with the production of music and the playing of music. And that honestly provides the touch paper for everything else that comes out of it. I mean, without a real world musical experience, there isn't really much focus on anything else I do, to be honest. So I think short answer is, artist is how I wish to be addressed.
Addressed. I have here another snippet of we mentioned Robyn earlier, and here is a brilliant remix you did for Robyn of her single called "Don't Fucking Tell Me What to Do." All right, guys, here is Sharooz remix of Robyn.
My smoking is killing me. My diet's killing me. My heels are killing me. My shopping's killing me. My ego is killing me. Can't sleep, it's killing me. My label's killing me. Kick drum. My phone's killing me. My email's killing me. These hours are killing me. My toy is killing me. This flight is killing me. My manager's killing me. My mother's killing me. My can't sleep, it's killing me. My dreams are killing me. The TV is killing me. My talking's killing me. Let go, you're killing me. Ease up, you're killing me. Calm down, you're killing me. My God, you're killing me.
Robyn letting them know, don't fucking tell me what to do. A few days ago, it was publicly known that one of your businesses, which is Dynamic Music, a publishing company, was acquired by one of the biggest mammoths in music, BMG Publishing. Could you tell more about how Dynamic Music, another successful venture that you created, that you're the mastermind behind, how did Dynamic Music start?
So Dynamic Music was actually, for the most part, was a music library, like production music. It's those that are unfamiliar with it. It's basically music that's created specifically to be synchronized into TV and film. So it's TV and film music essentially that sits on a producer's hard drive, and they can freely use, like promo producers and people that cut TV programs can freely use parts of that library to create music for their programming. And I've been doing some of this for like Sony ATV and EMI, for all these big publishers for years, actually. It was something I was doing alongside Sample Magic, again, just to sort of supplement my income and help me out with the studio costs and stuff. And, you know, I started to, by my own admission, get pretty good at it. I started to, it got to the point where it was almost more beneficial to get involved with doing a production music album than it was putting my own records out.
Yeah.
And after a while, I started to find that the major publishers they had such a rapid turnover of staff that I'd end up building a relationship with one label and then one publisher, and then end up just not knowing who was next. Yeah, where they were. It got frustrating. I stopped doing it. And somewhere along the line, my friend Will Mills, who was one of the original, I think he was the second employee at Shazam. So he'd been right at the start from Shazam. He had stock. He was very well regarded on the executive team at Shazam. We got friendly. And then we decided he was making a lot of production music as well, actually. He was doing a little library music. He had the same frustrations as me. It was weird how many different similarities there were in both of our situations at that time. We got together and just decided we should do our own library. And in all honesty, I mean, that was 5 or 6 years ago. We really roughed it for a couple of years. We spent a lot of money on getting like promo people that were working at some of these other major production music libraries to do like our marketing. And these people would literally have to like cold call ad agencies, which is one of the most horrible jobs in the world, to try to sell them our music.
Yeah.
It wasn't very successful. It didn't get anywhere. We ran out of money. We had an office that actually got flooded, and we lost a bunch of our computer equipment. There were so many horror stories.
Oh God!
It wasn't great. The first couple of years of that business were not great, and then we got some more people on board. We expanded what would probably be known as our board. I hate to call it a board because at that point it was still me and a couple of friends.
Yeah. And how did you get these people acquired? Like, how did you get them on board? For the people out there who don't, yeah.
One of them was my partner in Sample Magic, actually.
Okay.
And another was a girl called Rachel Menzies, who was working in Sync in Soho. She was working for a lot of, like, basically for ad agencies, finding high-profile songs for big ad campaigns. So she was really well connected in terms of pitching the music. She came on board, did a fantastic job, essentially setting us up with sub-publishing deals all over the world. So she got us publishing agreements with all these big major publishers, one of whom was BMG.
Wow.
All over the world, like everywhere from you know, the Middle East and the Far East through to Benelux and France and the US and even Mexico. We had about 20 sub-publishers at one point. And last year, BMG, who started sub-publishing us in the UK, actually, they took over our entire UK marketing arm. Just, you know, they came to us and asked us if we were interested in selling the company. And in all honesty, my role was at that point so minor that it kind of felt like a no-brainer to continue the way we were. And you know, rather than not really being involved, it was, you know, a perfect opportunity to have a big company come in. And because so many of my friends were writing for the library, it was a fantastic opportunity for them to get their music, to get their songs out via BMG, which, you know, would be tenfold more usage than what we could do. So it worked out really well, actually, really well. It was good to have some really good news on that. Yeah.
And for the so I'm sure you've learned a lot of things, you know, dealing with writers and publish. Obviously, you were the publishing company. What are another lesson that you have to learn as you're walking the path of an artist? You know, I spoke to some of the other artists that I had on board. You know, I think everybody more or less said that, you know, publishing is one of the hardest things to wrap your brain around, because I mean, you can read about it, but it's not something you learn about in school. You know, it's a foreign subject. So, but what have you learned along the way? You know, working with writers and being an artist yourself. So I'm sure you had to be in the minds of creators and how to, you know, to protect your own work, but you know, you're also a company. So what are the nuggets you've learned as a company to help creators, you know, take care of their creations?
Well, as an artist and a publisher, I would say that I mean, it's an old cliche, but your publishing is pretty much your best asset.
Yeah.
The copyright you have in the song, not the recording, that's the publishing.
Yeah.
That is the most valuable commodity you can possibly have, because the moment your song gets played anywhere, whether it's in a club, whether it's at a festival, or even primarily on radio or on TV, that revenue is automatically kept for you by a performing rights society and accounted to you. So you don't really have to do anything. Your songs can sort of work for you while you don't actively have to be worrying about collecting revenue from them. And when I was doing Sharooz and for Principleasure as well, I've collected all my own publishing. I had a song on a Netflix series called Baby last year with Principleasure, and it all completely happened by chance. Someone messaged me on Instagram and was like, "Hey, can you use this song for a Netflix show?" And I thought about it and I checked it out, and it was actually quite cool. It's called Baby. It was just this weird Italian drama about all these school kids that are basically hookers in their prostitutes in their spare time. Yeah. And it looked absolutely brilliant.
You're like, it's perfect. It's a perfect film too.
It was it was pretty dark, and I checked it out. I did the whole sync on it myself. I did the contract was a couple of pages long, and a month later it was on Netflix, and the Performing Rights Society collected the revenue for me, and that cemented to me how important publishing is and how valuable it is to know what you're doing with your publishing and to register your songs with the Performing Rights Society, because when opportunities like that come around, you don't need a publisher. You don't need somebody to stand in the way of you and the person that wants to use your music. That's fantastic. And what's starting to happen, and something that I've called for a lot, is for big ad agencies, the BBDOs, the Saatchis of this world, to engage directly with artists to play your track. Because you kind of cut out that, and I'm saying this from a publisher's perspective too, like there's no reason why somebody should be acting as an arranger or a fixer on getting your music out to picture or out to avenues other than the recorded sphere. And that is why publishing is so important. Like, if that's your asset, that's your commodity, what you've written in your songs is your property, and it's quite easy to be able to see revenue from it, as I say, without having someone else be privy to it, another agency or body.
So if you could give like a little Sharooz masterclass for writers out there, like if they're just starting, I think the climate of the music industry has definitely changed since we started 20 years ago, and
Absolutely.
Because of social media, of course there still is some sort of a barrier, but people are more approachable because of social media. So you could just write to people and maybe get create relationships by yourself. But what is your advice to people who want to, for example, get into this?
Yeah, I mean, the first lesson, the very most important part of this, is to make sure you're registered with the Performing Rights Society, whether it's ASCAP or PRS or GEMA, whoever it is, in your territory. I mean, absolutely make sure your stuff's there. Every time you write something that's released either by yourself or by a label, make sure it's registered. Fill out the forms, the online form. Make sure it's up on their system so that when it's performed, they can track performances of it. Ensure that everybody's properly credited on there. I mean, I've got a very good friend in Los Angeles who ended up writing quite a few songs with Lana Del Rey and did incredibly well out of it, as you can imagine. At the last minute, the person that was registering the splits with the Performing Rights organization out there just about remembered to include his name in the credits as a guitarist and the writer of a few of those songs. And if that person hadn't done that, it may not even have come to be that he would have been credited and subsequently paid in the millions for writing these songs. So registering your songs is incredibly important. Making sure you're tracking usages and to get them used in the first place, of course, is a very it's its own profound stream of knowledge. But as you say, contacting anyone and everyone that's relevant to you, to what you do via social media is obviously a great starting point. Contacting sync agencies, ad agencies, you've got absolutely nothing to lose by cold calling or cold emailing anybody right now. And of course, it's not exactly the atmosphere environment to be like, hey, check out my song. But that's not to say you should be giving up. I mean, you should definitely be mindful of the fact that music, the usage of music is something that's increased exponentially while recorded music revenue's gone down.
Absolutely.
So be mindful of the opportunities that are out there and the ways in which your music can be used and in different alleys and different ways. And just make sure it's registered and ready to be, I hate the word, but exploited is probably the word that the publishing industry used.
And would you say as well, like now we also mentioned it's the best time for being an independent artist, putting your music out there after you've registered your music and you've created some banging music and you've registered it. There is no reason for not, if you haven't gotten it signed to a label or you license it to another label, there is no reason for you not to put it out there. There's so many aggregates or companies that can help you put out your music. So wouldn't you as well say that it is the time to not wait and put out when you feel you're ready to put it out yourself and accumulate momentum by having music out?
100%. I mean, there's so many companies like AWAL, for instance, who are just absolutely brilliant. They have their own, I think they've got their own publishing facility as well. But they're an aggregator that basically deals with all the download sites and even does some marketing and can suggest marketing if you get to a certain level with them. But it's so easy now to get on Spotify. It's so easy to get on, and SoundCloud does it as well. I mean, I think, and Bandcamp increasingly is another great way to get your downloads out into the and they do. I mean, in terms of revenue share, they're just about the fairest company there is. I think
they let go of during the it was a few weeks ago where they let go of their cut and gave it 100% to the artists.
Yeah, which is again a fantastic move. But there's never been a better time. I mean, of course, if you are, and I can only really speak for electronic music here, if you have a sound that fits a particular niche and fits a particular type of DJ, there's nothing like being part of that family. Like if you're a Hot Natured or a Ame and Dixon, if these guys are your favorite DJs or whatever, Solomon, you want to be in with those labels and hopefully part of that family. But I know so many talented artists that have waited years to be to get themselves into that families like that and never managed to get in. So in the meantime, you're not going to sit in your hands and hope that one of these guys spots you and brings you in. You got to get out there and get your stuff out there and make sure it's obviously the best you can do, not just in terms of recording and songwriting, but also in mastering and presentation and how the artwork's done. Pay loads of attention to how it looks, how it's named, how frequently you drop stuff. But you should definitely be getting it out there and registering the publishing, and that's your calling card nowadays. Like Spotify, more than ever, more than SoundCloud, is your calling card.
Absolutely. Speaking of presentation and full package, that's one thing that you've always been known for, especially, I mean, from as I mentioned with Sample Magic. That's one thing that I really loved about that company. Not only did it sound great, but your packaging looked good, and obviously you've carried these elements together in your own packaging. Because I want to play a little snippet of a track from Principleasure for the guys out there who are just tuning in. Principleasure is Sharooz. This track is called Psychotrope. When I heard this first time, I was like, I need to play this. The kids need to hear this. So guys, here's a little snippet of Psychotrope. Yes, sir. Baseline. I love that track. When I thank you for creating this. When I had the voice of house music, Miss Inaya Day, on a couple of weeks ago, we spoke about, or she mentioned how important it was to have a camp around you, to keep your, to keep your knowledge fresh for the business side. So I'm curious to know who are your mentors, and who do you look to, or what do you look to as a source of business inspiration to keep your relations healthy and keep everything smooth and flowing?
I at this point, it's probably just my artistic influences are still the people that fuel business creativity, if that makes sense. I can't sit here and say that, I love Elon Musk or something like that, because it would be disingenuous. There aren't really any sort of business minds out there. I mean, if you think about a classic record man like Ahmet Erdogan, like that. I mean, I love hearing stories about those guys and what they did and how they set up. I mean, those are fantastic stories. Yeah. But I think modern music industry, I mean, certainly in electronic music, I think there are people that are fascinating personalities and have done incredible things. I mean, you would look to a very obvious example, someone like Carl Cox, who's managed to maintain at the very top of what he's done for 30 years. I remember seeing him in like 92, 93 playing hardcore. And then also looking at people that are just coming through that are, also not just incredibly well, making incredible records, but also really well branded and just picking the right things to get involved with. Like guys like Daniel Avery, for example. It's really, it's kind of like those are they're my mentors, really, in a sense. Like I can't really use the word meaningfully, but I look to artists more than anything, I think, for my inspiration in everything I do. It's tough to follow companies and certainly corporations and things. Like, I can't sit here with any conviction and say, I love what such and such musical instrument manufacturer is doing, or such and such major record label is doing, or that person that works at that place. I think I've always come from the sort of DIY aesthetic of artistry, and I've always looked down on, not down, but I've always looked on corporations with a certain suspiciousness that's always been a bit like, how do I fit into this? Okay. And I think that's where the energy to do things by oneself has come from.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, okay, so it was not from like your dad or your family, a family of comers who had successful businesses who passed the baton on to you.
No, I wish there was more to it. But and unfortunately, it didn't really come from anywhere other than just a will to be able to do this stuff every day and not have to sit in a bank with a suit on and do a 9 to 5.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, because I think through the course of these series, the common thread of all artists, it seems like now, is that there was just a knowing. People just knew. And for example, Robert Owens, who I had on 2 weeks ago, he was just like he came from a motivation of when people said that you can't do it, that he wanted to. He was suspicious as well. Well, there must be a way to do it. And that's the beautiful thing at the end of the day. And what I hope to relay this message to the people out there, that it's not necessarily something that you've learned from an academic point of view, or it's not necessarily that you come from a lineage of successful business people, but it's really down to the individual person and the willingness and the fire to just do it.
That's right. And you mentioned something really interesting there, like that being told you can't do something is such a strong motivator. And that's where I came from. I came from a place where, having Iranian parents and growing up in a place like Northern Ireland, which was not culturally diverse, which had a huge civil war, which was culturally repressed, was ethnically repressed, was politically repressed, it was controlled by the church, by a very nasty branch of the church, I should say, by a very bigoted branch of the church. And I was used to being told I couldn't do things. I was used to being told at school I couldn't get something, I couldn't have something, I wasn't picked for things. I wasn't given the ability to do anything that I felt was special or spectacular. I was never singled out for anything. And, I'm not going to draw any conclusions on that point, but all I can tell you is that it was a really strong motivator. It was a massive, I had a huge bugging a huge fire under my ass to get up and do stuff, because no one was ever going to make it easy for me. And that's probably the single strongest motivator I can possibly put out to anybody, you know.
Wow. I mean, I have to say amen to that. Well, that's kids, you got it. That's the nugget. That's the moral of the story, you know. Get up, do it yourself if you have a dream in music and entrepreneurship. Sorry, you were just cutting out.
Don't let anybody stop you.
Don't let anybody stop you. And especially, you know, I personally where I am in my career right now, for years I started, you know, started on a major label, and then I had to start all over again in New York when I lived in New York. But that's where I was like, I need to do it myself. So I started a production company or a label, and now fast forward here in Berlin. I'm really interested in the entrepreneurial side. Now that's really has my focus, because for many years I wanted to be the baddest I could be. And I feel that, you know, those skills, I have that more or less under control now, or, you know, it's a moving thing, but now the next phase in my career is the entrepreneurial part, which can keep me sustainable in this business. And you're a living witness that is just, you know, keep moving, keep doing it. You know, whatever the next impulse is inside of you, you know, just do it, and trial and error, and acquire as much knowledge. And wouldn't you say, surround yourself with people who are, many times they should be smarter than yourself, so that you can lean on somebody.
Absolutely right. I mean, you know, having smart friends, having motivated friends, inspirational friends is hugely important. But on the other hand, it's also important to be there for people that, you know, that you don't automatically aspire to. Like, you can't pick or choose your friends. It's always also good to have a few people around you that aren't afraid to tell it to you like it is, or just want to go for a beer and not hear about all this stuff. You know, I tend not to mention my work too much when I'm out and about, and, you know, having dinner with friends or whatever. And that's good. I like that, because when I'm in, you know, a lot of the time when I'm in the States, friendships are based around business. And I'm not sure if I feel comfortable with that always being the case. I mean, you should have situations and people in your circle that aren't always just connected to what you do as an occupation or what your aspirations are. And that's what's good about the UK. You know, we're very good with that.
Yeah.
But with that said, you know, having good people around you is hugely important, and people you can collaborate with properly, that have knowledge that you don't know, and there's things that you can tell them that you can share. And that's how great synergy is created, creatively or entrepreneurially. And that's, you know, it's a glaringly obvious lesson, but something that should be paid a lot of attention should be paid to it.
Yes. I want to, I could talk to you for hours, but I know you're busy and you need to move on, but I still have a few more questions. And we need to mention another important venture that you've created, because after Sample Magic was sold, then you embarked on another journey and created, I hope I'm correct when I pronounce it, Audiare. Is that correct? Yeah.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, well done. Yeah.
I did a few takes of that when I made the intro. Audiare. But could you please just let's just touch on Audiare and how this came to be and what it is, and what your intention with Audiare is as well.
Yeah, so Audiare, it was kind of similar to Sample Magic. I was using a lot of software instruments in my own productions. I mean, obviously doing quite forward thinking by my own admission, electronic music, and wanting to have these sounds and ways to make sounds that weren't commonplace, that not every producer had. Mm-hmm. I just started working with developers to create my own plugins, basically, as we call them.
Yeah.
And it was a real tough challenge. It was really hard to be able, like, I was a completely different discipline to making sounds or running a publishing company. It was, being able to understand how developers work together to create something like this, and knowing about the considerations you have to make with, like, a user interface and compatibility and tech support. Wow. And all these things.
Real nerd stuff.
It really real nerd stuff, but very applicable to any business.
Yeah.
And great life experience, I suppose you could call it, but great experience to have, to be doing this stuff and to every day be challenged by these problems, really highly involve technical problems, trying to solve the issues that come with building a sophisticated instrument. It's been an amazing journey. It's probably been the one thing I've been involved with which I feel the most personally invested in.
Wow.
Like creating these instruments, seeing people making sounds and making music out of them, and creating sounds with them and sending them to us, and some really high profile composers that I've admired so much in my life. Like Guy Sigsworth, for example, being one of them, and John Tejada, and all these guys who I'd worshipped for years.
Yeah.
Using our instruments to make really unique sounds is just about the one of the real high points of everything I feel I've done.
Wow, that's amazing. I just want to briefly pull up your link so people can find you. You just mentioned Audiare, but we're starting from the top. You can't see this, but people can find you on Sharooz.com.
Yeah, that link that goes to an old SoundCloud actually, which I haven't put anything up on there for like 5 years. So the best thing probably for Principleasure is probably Spotify.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna type that in, and when we're done with this,
Principleasure.com actually. I think that just goes directly to the it's like a Linktree page that has all the streaming sites.
Okay, and also I have here a little link of Audiare for the audio files and audio nerds out there as well. Please check out Audiare.com. That's correct, right?
Yes, indeed.
Yes, I'm gonna type in the correct links from you when we're done with this video, so people can find you. But I need to ask you just a few questions before I let you go. So are you up for a little game of trivia?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, okay. I hope I don't embarrass myself.
No. I'm sure you won't. So actually, I didn't hear any names. So this first question fits in perfectly. Name me your top 5 favorite artists.
Wow, that's tough.
Because then we get to know where that sounds and the scapes and all that comes from, right?
Sure. So John Carpenter has to be in there. I mean, every soundtrack he's ever done is just a huge inspiration. Prince has to be there because he's one artist that throughout his entire career, I just absolutely loved everything he'd done.
Yeah.
I think that Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross would probably be in there for their soundtracks again, but also everything Trent Reznor's done under Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah.
I think probably like in recent years, in the last 10 years, Errol Alkan would have to be in there somewhere because he's just had such a legendary label under Fantasy. And also he used to run a night called Trash, which kind of got me into my second wave of electronic music. Fantastic DJ and producer from North London, and he's been involved with some really cool bands. And the last one would have to be a band, to be honest.
You came from a band. You need to represent the band.
It would have to be a band. It would have to be, and thinking off the top of my head, you know, man, what single band has had the biggest? I mean, an obvious one would be Depeche Mode.
Yes,
just in terms of sheer rock and roll, and you know, Dave Gahan, and what an amazing frontman he is. Yeah. But you know, somebody like Joy Division would come a close second. You know, Stone Roses might figure in there, so it'd be a tie between those three.
Wow. Okay. Well, you blew the top 5. So you gave me the top 10, but that was a great top 10. All right. Next question. This is a sound nerd question. Drum machine showdown. If you have to pick one. 808 versus 909. That was my initial question, but you say, maybe you have others. You could, if you have to pick one that just goes, that you know you're safe with this. Okay.
Well, it's got to be the 808. I mean, if I can unplug this, I've got one right next to me here. When I got locked down, I actually went on eBay and bought my second 808.
Really?
I needed to have it here because I can't live without it. I mean, it's such a flexible, like every time I turn this thing on, it's like history is in your hands. Who's owned this thing? Who's had it before me? What's its history? You know, and the sound.
The youngins of today that's all it sounds like that they're emulating, huh?
Yeah, everything is, it's literally every drum machine in some way, shape or form has 808 samples on it or has sought to emulate it in some way. It's an absolutely iconic beast, and I'll probably be making music with it for another 20 years.
Yeah.
808 all the way.
Yeah. 808 all the way. All right. Speaking of low end, name me a bass sound or bass synth that just always works?
That's an easy one because I've used it on every record I've made for the last 5 years. That's the Roland SH101. It's like a little gray. It's from the 80s. It doesn't have MIDI. It's like a 2-octave keyboard, so it's designed to be like a keytar actually. The SH101, and it's so versatile. I mean, it's so straightforward, the front panel. I mean, there's like one oscillator and one sub oscillator on there or something, a bit of pulse width modulation, but it is the most iconic and in my mind revered synthesizer of all time for bass. Really, you can do acid on it. You can do like crazy pulse width leads, like hardcore style leads. You can also do like really squeaky, like soul wavy type stuff. It's really versatile, amazing synth. Yeah.
Take notes out there, kids. Take notes. Okay. Most memorable party, Ibiza or Berlin?
I think probably Berlin. I mean, yeah, and I think so. I think Berlin. I mean, Ibiza's fun, but like it's not really my thing. I'm not really like a daytime party thing. I'm not really one to sort of, have the sunglasses on and be hanging by the pool. I mean, sure, it has its place.
Yeah.
But I just tend to favor the music in Berlin a little more. And I think for me, there's so many iconic clubs there, like Weekend, Tresor, Watergate back in the day. I mean, there's a ton of Club de Legionnaire. What's it called?
It burned down.
Club de Visionaire.
Club de Visionaire burned down.
Yeah, the Visionaire. Yeah, I did hear that. Yeah, that's really sad to know. Yeah, and that was really sad, very very sad news because that was an iconic space, particularly daytime party.
And Berlin, for the people out there who haven't been partying in Berlin, Berlin is just like next level. And it's not seasonal like Ibiza is. It's just all around, and people are. There's a reason why. There's a reason why people wear black. 365 is just. It's a dark city when it can't be a dark city.
We love it.
And we love it. All right. Deeper question. What is your biggest achievement?
Biggest achievement on a professional level would be biggest achievement,
or anything in life, anything that you consider.
Well, in life, it's becoming a father. Oh,
wow.
Hands down, yeah, of course. I've got a daughter, a beautiful daughter, and it's life changing. Yeah, 100%. The best thing that's ever happened to me.
The best thing, wow.
Changed my life. I was never really into it, and into the idea of actually having a child until that happened, and then it was groundbreaking.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. And my final question for you, Sharooz, what would you like your legacy to be?
Just that I helped people be able to, just that I helped inspire people, honestly. Like be it through sounds, be it through, instruments or through the music, inspiring others. It's got to be as simple as that, That's inspiring creativity.
And you certainly inspired myself, and for the people out there, I hope you too were inspired by the words of Sharooz Raoofi, who's been doing it and who continues to soar and continues to do it. I could keep on talking with you for hours, and I can't wait to see in real life, to dig more into, to what you're up to.
I really look forward to that.
I just want to say big thank you for taking the time to hang out with me, and I appreciate that you shared all these stories with me and with us. And
thank you so much for having me.
Please, of course, thank you. Please keep me updated on your whereabouts and all your ventures and all that. And I'm sure we're going to see each other through when the Rona is hopefully over soon.
Soon.
I hope the Rona is kind of like dwindling down in the UK or what?
It's getting a little better here.
It's getting a little bit better, yeah.
It's very cautious, but it's looking a bit better.
But you're moving. Sharooz is moving like there was no Rona. He's he's shaking and moving no matter what. Sharooz, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you for your time. And I want to leave the kids out there with my favorite for now, my favorite track of Principleasure, which is called Aurora. Do you mind just setting it up? Do you have like a few words of Aurora or? anything you want to say about
I
this
mean,
track?
yeah, it was my attempt at house music as just pure instrumental house music, and it was all done live actually.
Oh, really?
I just took it and edited it down into like a short piece of music basically. So all the drum machines were set up. I just hit play, just step sequenced everything in real time, and then pulled it into like 8-bar loops, and it came from that. So all live.
All live. Thank you so much, Sharooz. Kids out there, get your dance on. We're gonna leave you with Aurora, and I'll see you soon, mates. Please send my love and regards to your family. And
thank you.
We'll see each other soon. Thank you so much. Signing off.
Bye.
See you next week, guys. I'll be back next week for another episode of the Short and Sweet Session. And till then, stay happy, healthy, joyful, and kicking it. And I'll leave you with Aurora by Principleasure. Take care, everybody.